Any definition of a successful life must include service to others. The American dream means giving it your all, trying your hardest, accomplishing something. And then I'd add to that, giving something back. No definition of a successful life can do anything but include serving others. If the American people knew what we have done, they would string us up from the lampposts. Courage is a terribly important value. It means you don't run away when things are tough. It means you don't turn away from a friend when he or she is in trouble. It means standing up against the majority opinion. There's a lot of people who won't wear it on their sleeve or display it through some heroic act. But courage is having the strength to do what's honorable and decent. Now we can see a new world coming into view, a world where there is a very real prospect of a new world order. Be bold in your caring, and be bold in your dreaming. The anchor in our world today is freedom, holding us steady in times of change, a symbol of hope to all the world. We cannot hope only to leave our children a bigger car, a bigger bank account. We must hope to give them a sense of what it means to be a loyal friend, a loving parent, a citizen who leaves his home, his neighborhood, and town better than he found it. You got to wrestle with your conscience. You got to listen to people. It doesn't come so easy to me that this is right and that's wrong. It's never that simple. I'm President of the United States, and I'm not going to eat any more broccoli. Nearly all Americans have ancestors who braved the ocean's liberty-loving risk-takers in search of an ideal, the largest voluntary migrations in recorded history. Across the Pacific, across the Atlantic, they came from every point on the compass, many passing beneath the Statue of Liberty with fear and vision, with sorrow and adventure, fleeing tyranny or terror, seeking haven, and all seeking hope. Immigration is not just a link to America's past, it's also a bridge to America's future. We can find meaning and reward by serving some higher purpose than ourselves, a shining purpose, the illumination of 1,000 points of light. Now, we all have something to give. We don't want an America that is closed to the world. What we want is a world that is open to America. Education is not complete unless we teach our children not only how to read and write, but the difference between right and wrong. Be strong, be kind, be generous of spirit, be understanding, and let people know how grateful you are. Don't get even, comfort the ones I've hurt and let down, say your prayers and ask for God's understanding and strength, finish with a smile and some gusto, and do what's right and finish strong. No, I don't know that atheists should be considered as citizens, nor should they be considered as patriots. This is one nation under God. Freedom and the power to choose should not be the privilege of wealth. They are the birthright of every American. I'm conservative, but I'm not a nut about it. I want a kinder, gentler nation. I've often thought that the process of aging could be slowed down if it had to go through Congress. I have opinions of my own, strong opinions, but I don't always agree with them. I do not like broccoli. And I haven't liked it since I was a little kid and my mother made me eat it. And I'm President of the United States, and I'm not going to eat any more broccoli. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. The notion of political correctness has ignited controversy across the land. And although the movement arises from the laudable desire to sweep away the debris of racism and sexism and hatred, it replaces old prejudices with new one. It declares certain topics off limits, certain expressions off limits, even certain gestures off limits. What began as a crusade for civility has soured into a cause of conflict and even censorship. If I were to give advice to young people, high-achieving young people for example, I'd have to say, don't neglect your family. Politics is important, sitting at the head table is glamorous. Traveling around the world, trying to do something for world peace was wonderful. But family and friends and faith are what really matter in life. And I know that. I see it so clearly now. This is a fact. Strength in the pursuit of peace is no vice, isolation in the pursuit of security is no virtue. Our stewardship of the earth is brief. We owe it to those who follow to keep that in perspective, to be responsible passengers along the way. My first act as president is a prayer. I ask you to bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we bow our heads and thank you for your love. Accept our thanks for the peace that yields this day and the shared faith that makes its continuance likely. Make us strong to do your work, willing to heed and hear your will, and write on our hearts these words, use power to help people. For we know that we are given power, not to advance our own purposes, nor to make a great show in the world, nor a name. There is but one just use of power, and it is to serve people. Help us to remember it, Lord. Amen. Service is never a simple act. It's about sacrifice for others and about accomplishment for ourselves, about reaching out, one person to another, about all our choices gathered together as a country to reach across all our divides. We ought to increase legal immigration for our country's advantage. The high-tech world we are now dominating is dependent on educated folks, but we're short of workers. It is to our nation's advantage to encourage high-powered, smart people to come into our country. It's amazing how many people beat you at golf now that you're no longer president. We are a nation of communities. A brilliant diversity spread like stars, like 1,000 points of light in a broad and peaceful sky. Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge. Now, we can see a new world order coming into view. A world in which there is a very real prospect for a new world order. A world where the United Nations, freed from a Cold War stalemate, is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders. Power can be very addictive, and it can be corrosive. And it's important for the media to call to account people who abuse their power, whether it be here or elsewhere. I think the 24-hour news cycle has helped exaggerate the differences between the parties. You can always find someone on TV somewhere carping about something. That didn't happen 20 years ago. I believe we should make use of what we know. We know that the future of the earth must not be compromised. Every problem that the country faces is being solved in some community by some group or some individual. The question is how to get connected so that the whole nation can solve problems. A volunteer is a person who can see what others cannot see, who can feel what most do not feel. Often, such gifted persons do not think of themselves as volunteers, but as citizens in the fullest sense, partners in civilization. Every problem that the country faces is being solved in some community by some group or some individual. The question is how to get connected so that the whole nation can solve problems. A volunteer is a person who can see what others cannot see, who can feel what most do not feel. Often, such gifted persons do not think of themselves as volunteers, but as citizens in the fullest sense, partners in civilization. The world can therefore seize the opportunity to fulfill the long-held promise of a new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind. We know what works. Freedom works. We know what's right. Freedom is right. We know how to secure a more just and prosperous life for man on earth, through free markets, free speech, free elections, and the exercise of free will unhampered by the state. America is never wholly herself unless she is engaged in high moral principle. We as a people have such a purpose today. It is to make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world. A president is neither prince nor pope, and I don't seek a window on men's souls. In fact, I yearn for a greater tolerance and easygoingness about each other's attitudes and way of life. And so, as they climb the ladder of achievement, I'd simply say, remember what Barbara Bush told those girls at Wellesley, what happens in your house is more important than what happens in the White House. Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge. We are now in sight of a United Nations that performs as envisioned by its founders. Learning is good in and of itself. The mothers of the Jewish ghettos of the East would pour honey on a book so the children would know that learning is sweet. And the parents who settled hungry Kansas would take their children in from the fields when a teacher came. No president can easily commit our sons and daughters to war. International exchanges are not a great tide to sweep away all differences, but they will slowly wear away at the obstacles to peace as surely as water wears away a hard stone. We consider it vital that the community of nations be drawn together in an orderly, disciplined, rational way to review the history of our global environment, to assess the potential for future climate change, and to develop effective programs. I remember when I was shot down in that war. I remember how terrified I was. And it made me feel close to my family, and to God, and to life, and I was scared. The longer our graduation lines are today, the shorter our unemployment lines will be tomorrow. History will point out some of the things I did wrong and some of the things I did right. But the biggest thing that has happened in the world, in my life, in our lives, is this: by the grace of God, America won the Cold War. Time and again in this century, the political map of the world was transformed. And in each instance, a new world order came about through the advent of a new tyrant or the outbreak of a bloody global war, or its end. I will never apologize for the United States of America. I don't care what the facts are. Said after Vincennes shot down an Iranian airliner. A campaign is a disagreement, and disagreements divide. But an election is a decision, and decisions clear the way for harmony and peace. I mean to be president of all the people. We're going to keep trying to strengthen the American family, to make them more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. Abraham Lincoln truly inspired me. It wasn't just the freeing of the slaves, he kept the Union together. Some people even forget that today. What I think inspired me was the fact that in spite of being the President of the United States, he retained a certain down-to-earth quality. He never got to be a big shot, and he cared about people. There are truckloads of broccoli at this very minute descending on Washington. My family is divided. For the broccoli vote out there, Barbara loves broccoli. She has tried to make me eat it. She eats it all the time herself. So she can go out and meet the caravan of broccoli that's coming in. To those men and women in business, remember the ultimate end of your work: to make a better product, to create better lives. I ask you to plan for the longer term and avoid the temptation of quick and easy paper profits. I have just repeated word for word the oath taken by George Washington 200 years ago, and the Bible on which I placed my hand is the Bible on which he placed his. It is right that the memory of Washington be with us today, not only because this is our bicentennial inauguration, but because Washington remains the father of our country. Its family, and its faith, and its friends, and it's not the glamour of the presidency, or the wonder of going to receive the Nobel Prize. All those are important, of course. But maybe it's just that I'm 71 years old now. Its family, and its faith, and its friends. I would tell them that. Don't forget that. In your brilliance, don't turn your back on your friends. Don't think you're entitled to something. You're smarter than the next guy. Not all Americans are living the American dream by a long shot. Many can't even imagine it. There are impoverished Americans, the poor and the homeless, the hungry and the hopeless, many unable to read and write. There are Americans gone astray, the kids dragged down by drugs, the shattered families, the teenage mothers struggling to cope. Then there are Americans uneasy, troubled, and bewildered by the dizzying pace of change. The world also remains a hopeful place. Calls for democracy and human rights are being reborn everywhere, and these calls are an expression of support for the values enshrined in the United Nations Charter. They encourage our hopes for a more stable, more peaceful, more prosperous world. The United States is strongly committed to the IPCC process of international cooperation on global climate change. We consider it vital that the community of nations be drawn together in an orderly, disciplined, rational way to review the history of our global environment, to assess the potential for future climate change, and to develop effective programs. The state of the science, the social and economic impacts, and the appropriate strategies all are crucial components to a global resolution. The stakes here are very high, the consequences very significant. And I'm not a student of religion, but I don't find anything in what the principal teachings of Islam that put us in contradiction at all. In fact, the principles are the same as what we have: a diverse religious culture. But it's kindness, it's be good to your neighbor, it's love, and it's take care of children. It's all these things that so there's no anti-Islam. When I need a little advice about Saddam Hussein, I turn to country music. We join Armenians around the world as we remember the terrible massacres suffered in 1915 to 1923 at the hands of the rulers of the Ottoman Empire. The United States responded to this crime against humanity by leading diplomatic and private relief efforts. We are not here to enjoy the things on earth, but to pass them around. The people who do it are the happiest people you know. I have spoken of 1,000 points of light, of all the community organizations that are spread like stars throughout the nation, doing good. The only time I had any butterflies was when I stood up and backed toward the open door and looked down. Now that I am no longer president, I find I can no longer win every game of golf I play. Competence is a narrow ideal. Competence makes the trains run on time, but doesn't know where they're going. Now, I'm president. It would be pretty hard for some drug guy to come into the White House and start offering it up, you know? I bet if they did, I hope I would say, hey, get lost. We don't want any of that. My favorite picture is a picture of American soldiers surrounding a guy in a foxhole, Iraqi soldier, and the American guy says, "We're not going to harm you. We're American soldiers." From last night's All Together Now, a celebration of service, there can be no definition of a successful life that does not include service to others. You do not reform a world by ignoring it. A new breeze is blowing, and a nation refreshed by freedom stands ready to push on. There is new ground to be broken, and new action to be taken. There are times when the future seems thick as a fog. You sit and wait, hoping the mists will lift and reveal the right path. But this is a time when the future seems a door you can walk right through into a room called tomorrow. Each of the patriots whom we remember on this day was first a beloved son or daughter, a brother or sister, or a spouse, friend, and neighbor. We have a right to expect a police force that protects our citizens and behaves in a responsible manner. In the American conscience, there is no room for bigotry and racism. I do not mistrust the future. I do not fear what is ahead. For our problems are large, but our heart is larger. As president, I watched in wonder as Nelson Mandela had the remarkable capacity to forgive his jailers following 26 years of wrongful imprisonment, setting a powerful example of redemption and grace for us all. I firmly believed we should not march into Baghdad. To occupy Iraq would instantly shatter our coalition, turning the whole Arab world against us and make a broken tyrant into a latter-day Arab hero. But let me tell you, this gender thing is history. You're looking at a guy who sat down with Margaret Thatcher across the table and talked about serious issues. I can tell you this, if I'm ever in a position to call the shots, I'm not going to rush to send somebody else's kids into a war. Our nation is the enduring dream of every immigrant who ever set foot on these shores, and the millions still struggling to be free. This nation, this idea called America, was and always will be a new world, our new world. Great nations of the world are moving toward democracy. The fact is, prosperity has a purpose. It's to allow us to pursue the better angels, to give us time to think and grow. You know, I vowed when I became president not to talk about the loneliest, toughest job in the world, and I didn't. The rigidity of those pledges is something I don't like. The circumstances change, and you can't be wedded to some formula by Grover Norquist. It's, who the hell is Grover Norquist, anyway? We stand today at a unique and extraordinary moment. The crisis in the Persian Gulf, as grave as it is, also offers a rare opportunity to move toward an historic period of cooperation. Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace. An era in which the nations of the world, East and West, North and South, can prosper and live in harmony. The Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no, and they'll push, and I'll say no, and they'll push again, and I'll say to them, read my lips, no new taxes. If you believe that there's a being superior to yourself and that will guide you, strengthen you, that helps a lot, but, you know, you just have to stay the course. You just got to stay in there. You cannot be waffling or taking a poll to see what people think. You have to do what you think is right. There's a second life involved. No matter what your position is on abortion or the death penalty, you shouldn't put a pregnant woman to death. You cannot be President of the United States if you don't have faith. Remember Lincoln, going to his knees in times of trial in the Civil War and all that stuff. This aggression will not stand. With these words, George Bush committed the United States to the liberation of the oil-rich Kingdom of Kuwait after it had been occupied by the Republic of Iraq in August of 1990. Many schools include a service project as part of their curriculum, and many corporations have in-house projects for their employees or give them time off to do volunteer work. Many schools include a service project as part of their curriculum, and many corporations have in-house projects for their employees or give them time off to do volunteer work. A new breeze is blowing, and a nation refreshed by freedom stands ready to push on. There is new ground to be broken, and new action to be taken. Competence is the creed of the technocrat who makes sure the gears mesh, but doesn't for a second understand the magic of the machine. I try to hold my charisma in check. I got poked in the left eye on the collision. My vision is blurry in that eye. I had to play. It was for coach, and because it was a district game. I put confidence in the American people, in their ability to sort through what is fair and what is unfair, what is ugly and what is unugly. If you have a plan, we want to hear it. Tell your community leaders, your local officials, your governor, and your team in Washington. Believe me, your ideas count. An individual can make a difference. As for me, tough duty though it may be, I continue to do my part for the commercial recreation industry. Fishing, boating, tennis, golf, running, hunting, and all of this. Horseshoes. It's tough duty. Somebody has to do it, and I'm going to keep on. A new breeze is blowing, and a world refreshed by freedom seems reborn, for in man's heart, if not in fact, the day of the dictator is over. The totalitarian era is passing, its old ideas blown away like leaves from an ancient, lifeless tree.